Hey everybody, welcome to the MakerDAO community call. My name is David, and I am very happy to be the host here today. So we use this community call to kind of use it to inform the Maker community what's going on week to week at Maker. And lately we've been doing something different. We've been focusing a lot more on having interesting guests, facilitating interesting discussion topics, and more. On this call, rather than using it to kind of go over what's been going on the week at Maker, because actually our community has begun to regularly produce a publication that comes out every Monday called Maker Relay. And so all of the stuff that we used to cover in the community call can be pretty much found in that publication. So, you know, with people's time coming and attending, we want to make it more interesting. We want to make it more diverse. And so we've been focusing a lot more on guests. And today we do have a couple of really, really great guests. We have Sam McPherson and Bartek K. I will not pronounce Bartek's last name because it is Polish, long, and hard to pronounce. And so they are going to be talking about the DAI Optimism Bridge that Sam announced a couple weeks ago. So I'm going to invite Sam on screen and invite Bartek on screen. And I'm going to give over the mic to them. I believe they prepared a really nice presentation, so excited for that. Hey, Sam.
Hello, David.
Hey, what's up? What's up? So who's going to be sharing the screen, Bartek or you?
I'll be sharing.
Sweet, sweet. Hey, Bartek.
Hey.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing all right, doing all right. So before you both get into the presentation, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. So I'm Sam McPherson. I've been on this call before. I'm part of the smart contracts team. I joined into MakerDAO from the community. So I'm working under the DAO as opposed to under the foundation. So I'm a little bit unique in that regard. So I've been working under the DAO for about 6 months now. It's been great.
Nice, man. Nice. And actually, I know this is a little off topic, but I did want to ask you, I know the smart contracts team is doing their own core unit. And I know previous to the whole core unit framework, you actually got voted in as a facilitator for your own smart contracts domain team. Do you intend to do your own like core unit, or are you joining that smart contracts core unit? I'm kind of curious.
No, I'll be joining the smart contracts core unit. So that would, I guess, nullify the smart contracts facilitator role that I'm currently playing during this kind of interim period.
Got it. Got it. Cool. Nice. Thanks for the update. All right. Yeah. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. So Bartek, who are you, man?
I've been working for a foundation actually for the last 3 years, and I've been focusing on all sorts of aspects of the general liquidity ecosystem, if you like the fringes of the Maker protocol, doing a lot of data analytics, analyzing different smart contracts as well, some security stuff, and lately I've been doing a lot of R&D into different layer 2s, working close with Optimism team, with ZK Sync, Meta Labs, and Starkware, and just watching with interest this multi-chain environment that's like exploding in front of our eyes, and focusing on how the Maker protocol will have to expand to sort of chase the liquidity that's like spreading from Ethereum to other chains and rollups and whatnot, and looking forward also to ETH 2.0 and sharding.
Yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah. Actually, one of my first questions was, with like so many layer 2s coming out, how did this solution for an Optimism Dai Bridge kind of like get decided on rather than other L2s?
So from my perspective, there are only 2 flavors really, and the scaling on Ethereum, that's been mostly R&D for a long time. The Plasma research has been going on for a couple of years now, I think. And the Plasma group that was like at the front of the Plasma research, they rebranded into this Optimism team, right? Same people essentially. And And the optimistic rollups, so this is the flavor that they've got different security assumptions than ZK Rollups. And I think, like in my opinion, they can deliver generalized smart contract architecture quite fast, right? And this is like fully VM compliant. That's going to make it very easy for different projects to sort of try it out. ZK Rollups, you know, they've got much harder path, and they will probably come a little bit later, I think. But again, from Maker's perspective, it doesn't really matter because we want DAI to be on all of them, right? So,
right.
And because with optimistic rollups, there's this fast withdrawal problem, or let's say fraud-proof delay window problem, we kind of focus our research on this particular aspect.
Nice, because in general, like with any bridge that has a lockup solution, if you could figure out the solution for one of them, it might be a similar flavor of solution for the others, right? Like that's probably the thinking.
Yeah, I would say so, right? And it's, I mean, we're not talking really about, you know, moving Maker to a specific rollup. You know, we're actually trying to figure out how to use DAI in a cheaper way that, you know, what you have to pay today on Ethereum.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right. Well, let's give it over. I believe Sam has a presentation that he prepared about the bridge.
Yep. All right. Share. How do I share my screen?
You should scroll over your face, and there should be like a little panel that comes up top. Yeah,
got it.
There's a button there. Come on, Sam. This isn't your first rodeo, man.
I've forgotten.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm just busting your chops.
All right. So can you see it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I'll just kind of go over how Optimism works a little bit with relation to the Optimism Dai Bridge. So Optimism, in case people aren't aware, is a fully permissionless optimistic rollup scaling solution. Really, there's no built-in like bridge mechanism. Instead, there's a generic mechanism of message passing between L1 and L2, and from L2 to L1. So really, we'll be building contracts to take advantage of this messaging. The bridge is built on top of that. But using this generic mechanism, so we can implement deposits by locking ERC20 DAI into a deposit contract on L1, passing the message from L1 to L2, and then minting the equivalent token on L2. And similarly, withdrawals can be implemented by burning the L2 DAI, passing the message from L2 to L1, and then releasing previously locked tokens in the deposit contract on L1. So it goes full cycle. So here's kind of a visual representation of that. So for the deposit, you can see you have L1, L2 broken here. So you have your person who wants to transfer DAI to L2. So they initiate a deposit of 100 DAI to the Optimism Dai Bridge. The tokens will be transferred to the bridge and held in escrow. Then we call this message passing Optimism code to pass a message to Optimism. And it does this, it will pack another message on top of what's called the canonical transaction chain. So this is a list of messages such as, put some DAI into L2 that will get packed in Ethereum layer 1. So this is set in stone once this is packed into the canonical transaction chain. Then the sequencer will relay this message to the contract on L2, which will then forward it to our specific Optimism Dai Bridge, complete the deposit, and voila, you are minted 100 Optimism Dai. And then send it to the L2 account controlled by the same key. So for the reverse, we take the DAI, the Optimism DAI on L2, we send it to the L2 version of the bridge, initiate withdrawal, which will burn the DAI, the Optimism DAI. It will send a message to Optimism's message passing contract, which will then initiate a withdrawal in the canonical transaction chain again. So keep in mind, so this canonical transaction chain, this is sort of a list of messages that are to be processed. It does not include sort of what the end state result of what this will be. So it's up to the sequencer to periodically append sort of state updates on L1. And these state updates, because this is an optimistic rollup, so these state updates are just assumed to be correct unless proven not to be correct. So this is where we get the 1 week withdrawal sort of delay. We have to wait a week to ensure that there's enough time that any single actor can be like, oh, wait a minute, this person has submitted an incorrect state update. And so we have to roll back the state batches and then reapply the canonical transaction chain. But keep in mind, during this whole process, the canonical transaction chain is set in stone. It's just a list of these are transactions that are going through. So yeah, and again, it passes the relay message after 1 week and then completes the withdrawal, and you get your 100 DAI back on L1. Yeah, so the addition that Maker was proposing is that we can support fast withdrawals using an oracle. So I'll just run over how this kind of works in a nutshell. This difference on the right, you see here the canonical transaction chain and the state batches. So as I said before, the state batches take a week to clear that they are correct, but the canonical transaction chain exists almost immediately. And we can look at it and say, oh yes, this person did indeed initiate this withdrawal. So anybody can kind of verify that independently by just running Optimism node and sort of saying, yes, okay, this is correct. But we still need that week to wait just to be safe before confirming things on L1. So what we can do here is we can institute an oracle that instead of going through the relayer that Optimism provides, we can basically just say, will this, the result of processing this canonical transaction chain up to this point, will this result in me getting DAI out after a week? And if the oracle says yes, we can then kind of short circuit this and mint an FDAI token, which is a forward DAI representation of DAI 1 week in the future. And then we have this sort of like PSM style mechanism where it can just insert the FDAI into a vault and then mint you some amount of DAI so you can get it right away. Yeah, and you know, there's some fee or something, so it's maybe not exactly 1-to-1, but you know, close enough. And when the week passes, the original withdrawal is ready to go, and we have the Optimism messenger will, instead of sending the DAI to the user, it will send the DAI to the vault and close it out, and we make 1 DAI profit as interest. And if the oracle is wrong, and this is why it's important to have this FDAI token and not just pull the tokens out of the bridge. If in the event of a failure, we need the maker holders to ensure the losses. Same as any other thing, right? If we lose the collateral, we need to keep the accounting correct, and so we have to take a loss. And so this is an important case to take into account as well. So there are other ideas involved with this, still kind of exploring the space. So we could have a sort of third-party LPs instead of Maker Protocol. This would be some sort of like LP provider that would enable swapping directly between L1 and L2 without burning the tokens, which would be, you know, more efficient for small players and stuff like that. And we could also provide fast withdrawals for any token, which involves, say, Uniswap v3's out on L2. We could swap some token for DAI on L2 first, and then run it through the fast withdrawal process, and then back to on L1 Uniswap, swap it back, something like that. You can see the example there. Another note is that it's kind of interesting due to the permissionless nature of Optimism. We really need social consensus around the 1, 2 true DAI on L2. There's all these other like multi-chain environments where there are DAI showing up on them, but like without sort of Maker endorsing this, yes, this is sort of, we're supporting Optimism and this is the true DAI. There can be sort of a fragmented liquidity environment going on some of these L2 solutions. So for Optimism in particular, which I'm also very optimistic about, that will be a fairly substantial player in the near future. I think it's important for Maker to solidify their claim on what is DAI on Optimism. That's it. Any questions?
Yeah, I saw a couple questions in the chat. One is about making that presentation available, and me and you will connect on async, and I'll, if possible, I would love to post these slides on the forum.
Yep, I can just paste it right here.
Okay, yeah, that works. Sweet.
Yep.
And then besides that, Peyton had asked, what is special about the 1 week's time in the Optimism model? Is there something preventing malicious actions from showing, I guess, in 3 days?
It's a little bit arbitrary. Optimism has come up with this number. They got to pick a number. They want it long enough that it's like, you want to be pretty sure that everything that's going to L1 is absolutely correct. Mm-hmm. So they just pick a very, very safe number.
Got it.
But it's a little arbitrary, yeah.
But I can also add to this that there's some actually interesting crypto economics behind it, because you can imagine a situation where somebody, like an honest player, they actually see that there's a fraudulent state being committed, and they want to submit the fraud proof. It's just that, suddenly they are being censored by miners, right? So picking 7 days would literally mean that the miners would have to censor my transaction for the whole week, which Optimism team kind of assumed that on the Ethereum network is virtually impossible, right? The cost of such an attack would be massive. To censor a transaction for 1 week would require massive hash power or a stake in the future proof of stake. And 7 days is literally saying that the cost of such an attack would essentially amount to censoring a transaction for the full 7-week period, right?
7 days, you mean?
7 days, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. I don't have my head super deep into those mechanisms, so thank you, Bartek. I see Akash asks, is ETH still used as gas payment on Optimism layer? Could the same bridge be used for FETH, forward ETH?
Yeah, it is. And yeah, it would be, we would use WETH probably, I would imagine. But yeah, WETH is essentially ETH.
Got it.
But eventually, as far as the payment on Optimism on L2 is concerned, because Optimism is actually using the account abstraction for all the accounts. That means that every single account is a smart contract, to put in layman terms, right? That means that they can do whatever they want with how the gas will be paid in the future. Their intention is that the gas can be paid in any token. It doesn't have to be paid in ETH. It doesn't have to be paid in any kind of a native token, because you will have access to relays and whatnot, right? So interestingly enough, they do not consider it to be a priority feature for the launch, and they will probably, the first version will probably have some super simple mechanism how you pay for gas, and in the future they will likely to introduce more interesting mechanisms, and it will be possible because every single account is a smart contract on Optimism.
Yeah, fascinating. Super fascinating. Peyton writes, so say there's a malicious actor attempting to take advantage of our bridge. What would happen if someone found something malicious after the malicious actor has already bridged back to L1? So is that like a case where basically it actually is fraud? Yeah, can that even happen?
Like what time frame is this happening? Is this after the 1 week delay?
I imagine within the 1 week. So like if a person, burns their 100 DAI, immediately, gets the immediate withdrawal into layer 1, and then a day later, it turns out that they didn't really burn that 100 DAI or whatever, like.
Oh, yeah,
what's the-
Maker would take the loss for that.
But I think the only real attack is an Oracle attack on the whole construction, right? So if I were to attack somehow, which essentially means that if I were to attempt to double spend my DAI, I would try to send my DAI on L2 to somebody, right? Maybe to my account, to some other account at the same time, or right after. I would try to initiate withdrawal of now empty account, right? So I would try to withdraw money that I do not have. And such transaction will be baked into this canonical chain. And normally, under normal circumstances, the Oracle should verify it and say that, that's going to revert, right? That's going to fail because the person trying to withdraw money, they just don't have it. However, if we can manage somehow to bribe oracles, and the oracles will say, well, look, this withdrawal will succeed, well, then the Maker protocol will take a loss, right? So that's one attack, right? By trying to bribe oracles. Another type of attack is to try to bribe the sequencer, which is the main Optimism node. However, that would not affect Maker at all, because Maker does not rely, as you've seen from the presentation, on the state updates from the sequencer. Maker will run their own full node, and it will do the independent verification of all the transactions. And I think this is important to realize here about this construction. As Sam said, once the transaction is put in this canonical chain, it's going to stay there, right? It's immutable. You cannot revert transactions. You cannot revert the withdrawal, right? The only thing that can be reverted is the incorrect state update.
Got it. That makes sense. Akash asks, what is Maker going to charge for this fast withdraw functionality?
I mean, that's a good question. That's up to governance, I think. This is a technical implementation. That's something we'll definitely just need to discuss over the coming months.
Yeah. The way that I was thinking about it, because a part of that question was also floating around in my head. It was like, if we're taking like risk, not just in like losing to fraud, but also in spending money on like running the oracles for this thing, what income does this bring? And my thinking was, okay, like even if it doesn't bring any income and it's like purely infrastructure, it's still a win for Maker, because it increases DAI's usability and utility because it's available on a different chain. So although it might not directly like make back the money that will be spent on that bridge, indirectly it will, because it's ensuring that we have like legitimacy and a slice of the layer 2 pie, so to speak, like the market share there. But
sorry. So it's kind of like partially a business decision as well. Like we may even want to subsidize it entirely just to gain sort of market share, grow DAI, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of pieces to this, and we'll definitely have to discuss all the implications.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's options though, right? You could definitely set up paying for immediate withdrawals if you needed to. So a few more questions in the chat. So Guy asks, so we have DAI, layer 1 DAI, O DAI, Optimism DAI, F DAI, a credit for DAI on L1, and other unofficial DAIs on L2 because anyone can create, name a token. Is that right?
So maybe I can take this one.
Okay.
Actually, when we think about F DAI, sometimes we call it the forward DAI, but sometimes it's better to think about it as a tokenized withdrawal request. It's almost like a claim to DAI that's going to be released in 1 week, right? And the guy is right. We will have DAI on L1. We will have Optimism DAI on L2, which for all intents and purposes will be almost the same token. This F DAI, like I said, it's I think the better way of thinking about it in this context is a tokenized withdrawal request, and it makes it clearer that this is very individual, right? This tokenized withdrawal request, that's actually somebody trying to withdraw a certain amount. and we have to verify that. That can be okayed, and that means that it's got value, because after a week, it will actually end up with releasing some DAI from the deposit contract, and it may be worth zero, right? Because when we verify it and somebody is trying to withdraw tokens that they don't have, that's literally worth zero. Now, the other unofficial DAIs, I tend to think about it as a wrapped DAI, right? I don't think about it these tokens as DAI. This is just a wrapped token that is created by putting DAI into some other bridge, and on the other side of the bridge, there'll be a wrapped token, which is a representation of the DAI, right? It can be redeemed through that very bridge for the real DAI, very much the same like BTC and WBTC can be sort of interchanged, right? But nobody thinks about WBTC as real Bitcoin, right? It's a wrapped Bitcoin that's under some management of some custodian in the middle of a bridge. Anything you want to add, Sam, to this?
Yeah, but the interesting thing that's kind of new that I would say is different from, say, BTC to wrap BTC is that the custodian can be like Ethereum layer 1, which is like non-custodial, right? So this is kind of a new space where we can get these like unofficial DAIs that are wrap DAIs that are like pretty strong guarantees with the bridge because it's a smart contract. So there may be more competition than if like some random unknown person was providing custodianship on DAI to some other place.
Yeah, and this is a very, very interesting point, because so far we only had two types of bridges, really. The decentralized bridges with either the multisig of some sort of variation of that, or bridges such as RenBTC, where you have collateralized positions for agents operating the bridge, right? This one is purely permissionless, and it's trustless. And because anybody can deploy any type of a smart contract on Optimism, there will be nothing stopping people to try out different bridge designs. And of course, any single contract can take DAI, right? I mean, I'm sure that people have put their DAI into all sorts of smart contracts, with different expectations and different results. Sometimes perhaps surprising, right? Sometimes resulting in, I don't know, minting some pickles and whatnot. So who knows, right? What happens when you put the DAI into a smart contract?
Yeah. So just before I ask Akasha's question that came earlier, I'm going to ask guys because it's still related to this conversation. So the unofficial DAIs would still be permissionless. The real difference to the MKR, the real difference to the MKR endorsed version is brand recognition, right? Being able to say this is like an official thing from the Maker protocol.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
And the possibility for fast withdrawals as well, supported by the Maker protocol.
Nice. So Akash asks, is Maker competing with anyone else to provide this functionality like USDC or synthetics? And I want to add to extend that question. Is it given that this is all open source stuff, is it easy for people to just copy our solution and create their own bridges to Optimism?
Do you want to field that, Bartek?
So what makes Maker truly unique from other protocols is that Maker can actually mint DAI and provide unlimited liquidity by taking any kind of a collateral, which will be accepted by the governance, right? So in this particular scheme, Maker will use that tokenized withdrawal claim as a collateral, and we will provide this extra liquidity regardless of the amount. Other solutions will need to source this liquidity from somewhere, let's say from liquidity providers, and that could be an issue for a lot of protocols, because this liquidity may be stuck somewhere, or there may be a limit on how much you would be able to withdraw. Using the scheme that we've discussed, there will be no limit as such, right? We might put initially the debt ceiling to sort of understand better the risk, the Oracle attack risk. But if Maker governance decides that the Oracle attack risk is negligent, then I think this limit can be literally anything. And also we could try to support other tokens by minting DAI and using this DAI to actually purchase liquidity from the market to support fast withdrawals for other tokens. You cannot do this with other tokens that cannot be minted at will.
There's also the other part where a lot of other tokens don't have Oracle infrastructure, right? Besides like Chainlink and us, if the solution requires oracles, then you need to either get a service provider or start building your own, right? Yeah, cool. Chow from Brazil asks, nobody can lock up ODAI, right? Freeze, I mean. It would be good if you expand it. Yeah, if you expand on that question a little bit, that would be good.
I think that this means that you can't really. I mean, the DAO DAI will be as permissionless as DAI on L1. I don't think there's any intention to make the DAI on Optimism any less permissionless than the DAI on L1.
Yeah, we're using basically the same contract for L2 for the ERC20 DAI on L1.
Nice. So two questions. How secure is the code? Where is the code right now for this? And when is it going to be live? And I understand that the fast withdrawals is not going to be there at launch. It's something that's going to be phased in, if I remember reading the forum post correctly. So yeah, just some information on where the code is at would be good.
Yeah, so the code is in a repository. I can link to that. How secure it is, so it's under active development. Just give me a sec. Yes, it's going to be designed to be secure. We're going to build upgradability into the bridge so that we can kind of evolve as the Optimism landscape is evolving. Optimism isn't out yet, so we're kind of going with what their current versions are of what they're going to deploy. But once it's out, we intend to have the bridge out without fast withdrawals very quickly after that. And yeah, I'll just get the link.
Nice. And I'm going to add these links to the forum thread for this call. So the presentation is going to be there. The repo is going to be there. Everything will be there.
Okay. There's the repo.
Nice. Thanks. So Frank Cruz asks a question. Zooming out, will the DAO also look to expand via ZK Rollups, like Starkware's ZK Starks tech? Wondering if there is an interest to stay compatible with protocols like DYDX, Aave, etc.
Do you want to field that, Bartek?
I think it goes back to the original question that David asked. Why we have chosen Optimism. We haven't chosen Optimism. I personally think that we should look at all the other rollups and try to find the best way for the DAI to exist. Some rollups like Optimism, they are designed to be permissionless, very much like Ethereum. Other rollups, for example, as far as I know, Arbitrum, for example, which is another optimistic rollup, they are permissioned, and they, in a sense, that they have a whitelist of tokens that you can move through the official bridge, right? And I'm not really sure if this is a temporary design or this is the design that they're gonna sort of follow, but I think at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do with this simple wrapped token. You can only transfer, maybe use it on Uniswap and whatnot, but I'm pretty sure the protocols like Aave or Synthetics, they will be definitely more interested in having their own token with much more, I guess, sophisticated functionality, if you like, right, than just a simple ERC20 functions. And obviously Maker will be looking at all the other rollups, right? We're interested, as I said before, in having DAI available everywhere. And this is really about expanding usage of DAI. So that's short term. Long term is even more interesting because, I can definitely see that some of these rollups will have native assets. Still quite not clear how these native assets will sort of be created on these rollups, but I can definitely imagine a world where some of the rollups will actually have tokens or whatever asset it might be created natively on L2, and they might be used as a collateral, right? So who knows? We might try to use them as a collateral for DAI somehow, either directly on L2 or we'll be going the other way, right? And sort of try to move that asset into the L1 so that we can actually use it inside the vault. So Maker kind of becomes kind of a hungry protocol, right? It will be chasing liquidity everywhere, whatever the form or shape it takes. Because the more liquidity we chase, the more DAI we can generate, right?
Right. Nice. And I think that even with this bridge and interacting with other L2s, like on L1 at the base, right, we're still totally compatible with DYDX and Aave. And I guess it's like a matter of in the future, like what they're going to do with L2s, because I imagine if they also, recreate their protocols or, it really depends, right? There's just so much unknown from the place that we're standing now, right? So next question. Chow asks, ODAI will be able to use other dApps that have Optimism layer? Yeah, I assume.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Optimism Dai. So whatever is on Optimism, you'd be able to use it with.
If it supports that contract.
Got it. And then Akash asks, also, any idea what the timeline is for centralized exchanges to be able to withdraw to Optimism? So move Ether Dai from Coinbase to directly to an Optimism chain?
No clue. Talk to Coinbase.
No
Probably
clue
when
either,
there's like
but
a market leader, right? Like if
no
like
clue either, but everybody's watching Binance with interest, and it seems that direct withdrawals to Binance chain, but not just Binance chain, right? You can withdraw from Binance today to Avalanche and Phantom. Makes it super interesting, and I'm sure that other centralized exchanges will actually consider that. And if that's possible, then we might end up in this weird situation where there's actually more DAI on L2 than on L1 somehow, right? And just making sure that we get it right will be a very interesting challenge. But there's a lot of people having this firm belief that for casual users, like non-whales, let's put it that way, people priced out from the current L1, there must be a way to onboard directly to L2, and there may be no reason for them to leave L2, right? Why would you leave, this beautiful, fast and cheap island to go through this, dangerous waters filled with whales and dark monsters and whatnot, right? So I don't know. I mean, but again, I mean, this is literally something that we'll be looking into in the future because this space is evolving, right? And it's evolving rapidly, and we need to take, I think, a firm position as a Maker protocol, how Maker will support this multi-chain, multi-layer ecosystem.
I have like kind of a general question. If I have an ETH address both on L1 and on L2, let's say I'm an MKR holder, is there a way to like create and airdrop like an OMKR token on the Optimism side to match like the layer 1 side? I guess it's a question of like, are ETH addresses like 1-to-1 between Optimism and L1?
Yeah, so the your externally owned account, that is 1-to-1 with Optimism.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you can, it's permissionless sort of EVM setup, so you can do anything on L2 that you can do on L1. So you can make a contract that gives out what you're calling O-Maker or whatever, and give it to people, and maybe it has value, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah. No, well, the reason, the thinking behind that question was about like if we're gonna expand Maker beyond just transferring DAI to L2s, but also recreating the protocol on L2s what would that look like? And I imagine
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And I imagine like you'd want to recreate like at least like the MKR distribution there so that you can have the same voters and stuff or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. So we can totally build a governance relayer that will take the code coming out of the executive and then forward that to L2. So we can put governance in the exact same setup that just forwards messages to L2.
Oh, that's really
and is
cool.
in control. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. All right, so a few more questions in the chat here. So Peyton first. I realize there's no way to get precise risk parameters at this point, but has risk weighed in with potential ceilings we might be looking at for launch?
No, not yet. We're just doing technical development at this stage.
Got it. And then Kim asks, do you have a plan to create an FAQ around this? It would be helpful and we could link to it from a blog post.
It's a good idea.
I hope, David, that you'll actually do it. You're really good at it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually like the governance communications core unit that I'm working on. A part of its mandate is like documentation aid to GovAlpha. So right now, like the governance domain helps a lot with like educational resources and stuff. So yeah, maybe it will be in our wheelhouse. But what about documentation in general? Maybe like not FAQs, but what's the level of documentation that is happening as you guys are going through this development phase?
Yeah, so there's and this space is evolving so rapidly because Optimism's in active development. So we're kind of in close, tight integration with them. They're doing updates. We pull the updates in and do changes. And so there's documentation in the repository right now, but we need to kind of probably solidify things a little bit more before we expand that out to other places.
Got it. Got it. All right, moving ahead. So many questions. I love it. Thank you, chat. You guys are doing great this call. Guy asks, will MetaMask support Optimism from the outset via the custom networks API?
I don't know.
I think they're already supporting it, actually. I mean, after all, Optimism has launched the mainnet. It's very limited. It's not permissionless. Only synthetics is deployed there. But I think you can play with this today if you're the owner of SNX tokens.
Nice.
And my understanding is that you can definitely use MetaMask the same way as you can use MetaMask for Phantom and for Binance, for Avalanche and whatnot, right?
Makes sense. Makes sense. So Akash asks, what does it cost Optimism L2 to print their proof on Ethereum L1? Just curious if Optimism becomes super popular, there's not a crazy gas cost on layer 1.
So here's the thing, right? Because it's an optimistic rollup, there's no need for a proof. ZK Rollups will have to post the proof, and the smart contract will have to verify that proof. So that will incur quite significant gas cost. Optimistic rollups, they just literally post a state commitment, which is this tiny little piece of data, and transactions which are not put in the state. They are inside what we call a cold data. It's a very, very cheap operation. In my opinion, optimistic rollups, from the gas cost point of view, they will be actually cheaper, at least initially. It all kind of depends how many transactions you want to pack. However, there will be a significant improvement. I think probably we're looking 100x when the data is compressed and all potential optimizations are implemented. But again, I don't think that's going to be the case initially. If we can make 10x, 20x initially, you know, that it's going to be a pretty rad, I think. And you can definitely expect the Optimism team to work on optimization in the next release, right? The initial release will be just for people sort of learning the system and understanding the system.
Is there a case where somebody wouldn't be incentivized to publish a fraud proof because of like that gas cost?
Frankly, I don't think so. I would rather say that being able to submit a fraud proof is almost like, you know, this red big button which you can press when evil nation will attack you with an atomic bomb, right? But you know that, you know, there's just, I mean, literally years can pass before you actually have a need to press this button. So that may be actually the case as well. I mean, you have to remember that L1 Ethereum today, miners, when they publish block, they also publish state commitment, and this is, you know, very much optimistic. There is no proof that the state is correct. You can go to Etherscan today, you can have a look at the block, you will see transactions, and you will see what's called the state root. How do you know that this is correct? I mean, there's literally nothing stopping miner to put an incorrect state root and try to mint ETH out of thin air. The only thing that's actually stopping this miner is that others are watching, right? They can verify themselves, and if they see the liar, they will immediately punish the liar by rejecting the block, right? So all the hash power that's actually spent mining this block will be wasted. And here we will have a very, very similar situation. There's this, you know, there will be very strong incentive for the sequencer to publish correct state update, and frankly, I think it will be extremely unlikely that they will try to cheat, because they will be caught red-handed right away, and they will lose not just the stake, but also all the credibility as well, right?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So Frank asks, I was reading about Synthetic's move to OVM. Apparently they will hold upgrade keys for at least the first 6 months to ensure user fund safety. Is that the same story here with regards to the quote deposit contract, unquote?
So we're still working out those details. We're looking at either a multi-sig like they are, or getting the governance in control of the admin access right away. So we'll announce more details on that when we have them worked out.
Got it.
But I guess you can't get it right the first time, can you, right? So there must be some way to upgrade the bridge, you know, just to allow for some iterations until we hit the final design. And then I guess, you know, when the final design is sort of steady, then you'll be able to, I mean, the governance obviously will be able to decide what to do with the keys and potentially burn them. But, you know, it's a common debate, you know, how upgradable or immutable you want your system to be, right? And
Yeah.
it all comes down to the risk.
Nice. I know. So I know, like, when multi-collateral DAI was still in development, there was like this huge emphasis on formal verification and like really nailing down like the core contracts. And I know, like, in this environment where we have to, you know, move fast as a protocol to innovate and produce like code that does really cool things, I imagine like a bit of the formal verification goal might like actually, yeah, let me rephrase the question. Yeah, is there any like what's the standard for the code? Are you guys aiming to get it formally verified? Is it good enough that it's just audited by a few firms? And like curious on your thoughts about whether it's worth it to formally verify like majority of contracts and stuff like that.
Yeah, so there's kind of two pieces. There's the bridge piece, and then there's the DAI, ERC20 DAI contract. So the ERC20 DAI contract is basically the same as the one in L1. We've just sort of modernized a little bit of it to bring it up to modern standards. But other than that, it's basically the same thing. So that one is immutable. And because the contract is previously formally verified, we can be fairly confident that one's going to be okay. The bridge, though, on the other hand, is going to be upgradable because we're moving on a yeah, we're moving at a fast timeline. We need to be able to upgrade it, not even necessarily for bugs, but just like to do the fast withdrawals or something, you know, in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're being very careful with this. But yeah, formal verification is definitely desired on the bridge eventually.
Yeah, and it sounds like what you're saying is it makes the most sense to do formal verification on code that is not planning to be upgraded, right?
What do you mean by that?
Like if you're doing formal verification to code that is going to be changed in like the near future and upgraded. Yeah, actually, maybe like my question doesn't really make sense because I imagine you'd probably want to build from the ground up with it in mind. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that in parallel, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Bartek.
Yeah, I was just about to say that your question, David, is actually something that I was like waiting for a long time for somebody to ask, because you just nailed, you know, I mean, people tend to sort of forget that the formal verification is actually done on EVM level. We don't trust compiler, right? We account for bugs in Solidity compiler. So when Maker says that there's formal verification done, that actually means that we've got the bytecode that's formally verified. That's how it works, right? At least for Maker and yeah, the tools that have been used for formal verifications, and we've used Klab for that. Now, the Optimism, to my knowledge, is actually the only rollup out of every other rollup that I know, which is pure EVM. All the other rollups, they take Solidity code. They say that, you know, you can like take your Solidity contracts, but not compile Solidity contracts, right? They take your Solidity code and they actually compile it to their own internal language. So Starkware has their own language, right? The ZK Sync has their own language. Even Arbitrum, interestingly enough, has their own language. So they do not execute EVM. They execute, you know, something else. And I think, I don't know about Arbitrum, but I think formally verifying whatever comes out from their compiler, which is, by the way, not a bytecode even, it's a circuit, it's a mathematical circuit, right? For ZK Rollups, that is going to be an interesting proposition, an interesting challenge as well, right? So I'm very curious how this space is going to evolve, and whether people who are doing formal verification for a living, you know, what is their approach to all new ZK Rollups, for example.
Yeah.
But going back to your question about upgradability, I mean, you can clearly formally verify whatever version of the code you've got at hand, right? And if you upgrade it, there's just a new code, and your verification of the former code doesn't mean anything, really.
Right. You'd have to do the whole process over.
Yep.
Got it. Yeah, that's super fascinating to me. Yeah, and that's very surprising that other L2s don't compile like purely from EVM, because you would think that they would want to, but I don't know. I guess this makes a really good case for why we're doing an Optimism bridge as opposed to others first. But yeah, it sounds like a kind of a secondary thing that the highly talented engineers are thinking about. So I dig it. And yeah, it sounds like it. I'm echoing what Ian is saying in the chat. It does sound like that feature is a feature, putting it loosely in quotes, is like huge for Optimism. Yeah, cool. And then I think Akash had a couple questions as well. So when could a version of the Maker protocol be on the Optimism layer? And same question for Oasis, which is the Maker Foundation's decentralized exchange.
So I think we kind of have to ask ourselves a few questions first before we even begin to scope out what that looks like.
Yeah.
And so like, there may be the case that we do want to put most of the protocol onto L2, but I'm not entirely convinced of that yet, because different protocols have different sort of usages. So like Uniswap, for example, is high traffic. People are swapping all the time. It's a perfect candidate to go on L2 right away. But Maker, you know, people don't like wind and unwind their leverage like many times per second kind of thing. It's not that sort of throughput. So I'm not sure if it's even necessary. It may be that once all the high traffic gas usage stuff goes to L2, we get sort of a breather with gas prices, and then it's okay to use Maker on L1 for a while again. But I'm not saying that's for sure. We just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I guess like the idea is we don't want to miss out on like a potentially large customer base. Like at the moment, basically only whales. It only makes sense for whales to use Maker, and because of gas prices, a lot of the smaller users with lower capital amounts got priced out. And if that's going to persist to be the case for another 1 or 2 or however many years, probably like I would hope maximum like 2 or 3 years. Yeah, should retail users, smaller users, be able to like use a version of Maker on the L2 that doesn't cost a lot of gas? And
So,
should we do the work to facilitate that? Is it worth it, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's a wait and see. Let's see what the gas prices do once Optimism's out and mature.
Yeah, fair answer for sure.
So let me provide my take on Akash's questions, because they are super interesting as well. I kind of think that the current approach for small users for protocols like Maker is going through intermediary, like let's say ER and Vault, for example, that allow me to actually put some ETH, whatever the amount is, and they will create one giant vault, right? But it doesn't have to be permissionless. It doesn't have to be ER. And I think there's a lot of scope for liquidity providers to actually provide such service for small users. They will just operate on one big vault. They will take small portions of collateral and they will pack it up, right? Bundle it together and just stick it into a vault. Because I mean, it may be expensive to use Ethereum for small amounts, but actually for bigger amounts, it's actually cheaper than centralized exchange, interestingly enough, right? If your trade is, I think, above maybe $10,000, which for a while is not such a huge amount, it's actually cheaper to trade on Uniswap than on the centralized exchange. And for the Oasis DEX, I think it's kind of right now, I mean, there is absolutely no reason to not deploy Oasis DEX on every single rollup, right? Which is EVM compliant, including Optimism, as there is no reason for, say, Uniswap or Sushi not to do the same, right? The Oasis DEX, after all, is just, permissionless order book type of decentralized exchange. It went out of fashion on L1 because of the gas costs, but on Optimism, we might consider bringing it back. But I think at the moment, the Maker community will have to decide whether they want to actually support the further development of the Oasis DEX protocol, right? Because it sits somewhat on the fringe of the Maker protocol. It's not at the core. And my opinion is that it's actually quite useful for liquidations to zero because you can create limit orders on chain and you can have sort of liquidity waiting, right, for the upcoming liquidations with the set limit prices. So if the Maker community decides to sort of fund, further development, then I'm sure that somebody will put time to actually put it on Optimism. Otherwise, we would have to create, independent community that will somehow find a way to fund the further protocol development. I like Oasis DEX protocol because, to my knowledge, this is the only on-chain, fully on-chain protocol, which is A, composable, and B, allows you to put limit orders, right? But right now on L1, obviously, that does not make much sense.
Yeah. Nice. Great answers and great questions from everybody. And we are about 30 seconds from the top of the hour. And so I'm going to open up to the chat. Any final questions? I'm happy to stay like a couple, 2-3 minutes over. But otherwise, this was an extremely interesting conversation. And yeah, thank you, Sam, and thank you, Bartek, for coming. Always a pleasure to speak with both of you.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, cheers. Cool. Yeah, and I don't see any more questions, so I'm happy to end it here. I'm going to be posting this recording today, and I have Sam's slides posted on the forum. So, cheers.
Thanks, David. We're looking for the thank you from you.
My pleasure, man. And take care, guys. Have a good one.